Welcome to Story Time. Tonight, join us on a gentle journey to a quaint town where a magical tree brings peaceful sleep and dreamy nights for all. The Dreamer's Tree, A Tale of Evershade. Part 1, The Woman of Willow Lane. In the heart of a green valley stood Evershade, a town neither too small to be overlooked nor too large to be impersonal. Cobblestone lanes wound between cottages with moss-draped roofs, and gardens overflowed with blossoms that nodded to passing breezes. At the town's eastern edge, where the road thinned into a footpath through whispering birches, stood a little ivy-covered house at the end of Willow Lane. It belonged to Elara, a woman of quiet grace and unhurried speech. She had lived in Evershade for as long as most could remember, her presence as constant as the lanterns the townsfolk lit each evening. But what made her home different from any other was not its facade, nor the garden bursting with marigolds and lavender. It was the feeling that grew in its walls after sunset, a kind of deep, unshakable peace. It hadn't always been that way. Years earlier, Elara had known the agony of nights spent awake, her body weary but her mind restless. She would try to will herself into slumber, staring at the darkened ceiling, counting the hours until dawn, knowing morning would greet her with heavy eyes. For months, sleep seemed something other people could summon naturally, while she fought an invisible current. One particularly restless night, she stepped outside, unable to bear the pressing walls any longer. She walked toward the forest. The moon spilled silver over the earth, illuminating the narrow dirt paths between the trees. Her bare feet brushed against moss, and the hum of crickets filled the cool air. Then she came upon it, the Dreamer's Tree. The great oak stood at the clearing center, older than the town itself. Its trunk was wide enough that 6 people clasping hands couldn't have circled it. Stories in Evershade claimed the tree knew the language of night. Its roots, they said, reached into the realm of dreams, and its leaves carried the murmurs of the sleeping earth. Without quite knowing why, Elara placed her palm upon its coarse bark. The world seemed to hush, even the crickets falling silent. A strange sensation rose, warmth, not from the air but from the tree itself, pulsing slow and steady like a heartbeat. That moment marked a turning. She didn't fall asleep there in the clearing, but for the first time in months, she walked back home feeling soothed rather than burdened. From then on, she returned each dusk. And slowly, she learned. Part 2, The First Lessons. The tree taught in silence. In its company, Elara began to notice rhythms, the ebb of daylight, the cool breath of approaching night, the distant call of an owl marking the hour between wakefulness and rest. She began to shape her own evenings, letting dusk become a time of unwinding rather than squeezing in more labor. At home, she replaced the harsh glare of her ceiling lamp with the golden flicker of beeswax candles. She sat by her window listening to the rustle of leaves instead of the ticking clock. She brewed tea from chamomile and valerian root, inhaling the steam before tasting it, letting it signal to her body that wakefulness was no longer needed. The change was gradual, weeks, months, yet undeniable. Her body began to trust the night again. Sleep returned not in a rush, but as a shy guest coaxed by gentleness. Elara learned that rest could not be seized, it could only be invited. And once she knew this, she could teach it. Part 3, The Visitors. Word of Elara's newfound radiance began to spread through Evershade. With each season, another restless soul would find themselves at her doorway. They were not sent with fanfare, they arrived quietly, often with tired eyes and hesitant hope. The first was Tomas, the town's carpenter. His talent for shaping wood was unmatched, yet of late he was making small mistakes, cutting boards half an inch short, misaligning joints. "It's as if my mind drifts when I should be steady," he confessed. Elara invited him to sit by her hearth. That evening she taught him the ritual of dimming, reducing the day's demands bit by bit until the mind followed suit. Within weeks, his hands were as steady as his mind. Next came Elara, a seamstress barely in her 20s, who stitched from dawn past midnight, the lamplight burning her eyes. She feared idle hours, thinking them wasteful. But Elara showed her how the stillness of night wove threads within the mind, the kind that repaired one's spirit as surely as her hands mended fabric. Soon, more came, a midwife with the weight of many births on her shoulders, a shepherd kept awake by worry over the growing storms, a schoolteacher whose mind recited lessons long after the children left. Each found in Elara's home a quieting they had forgotten was possible. Part 4: The Gatherings. As the years passed, these visits turned to gatherings. Once every fortnight, the troubled and the curious alike assembled in Elara's front room. Candles flickered on the low table, their golden halos pulsing gently. Mugs of steaming herbal tea were passed hand to hand. They spoke not of commerce, nor gossip, nor politics, but of their days, what had weighed on them, what small joys had surprised them, what they hoped their dreams might bring. The act of sharing seemed, in itself, a kind of release. Faces softened, shoulders loosened. One evening, Mara arrived, a writer whose days bled into nights in pursuit of her next book. She carried ink stains on her fingers and a storm in her head. In the hum of Elara's circle, Mara learned to end her day with a ritual, closing her notebook well before night and stepping outside to watch the stars. Weeks later, her words flowed more freely, released from the tight grip of exhaustion. Elara realized then, this was not her gift alone. The town itself was learning to honor the night. Part 5: The Festival of Nightfall. Change rarely arrives trumpeting its success. Yet, after several seasons, the difference in Evershade was visible. Shopkeepers opened later in the morning, their eyes brighter. Children played in the square without the crankiness that once marked their first hours. Markets were calmer, laughter easier to find. One autumn evening, the townsfolk proposed an idea, to honor the night with an annual gathering they would call the Festival of Nightfall. There would be lanterns, quiet music, shared meals under the stars, and most importantly, the event would end early, allowing everyone to return home to rest. On the first festival, the town square glowed with paper lanterns swaying like captured moons. Tables were laden with roasted squash, blackberry tarts, spiced cider. Musicians played lullabies rather than raucous tunes, their notes weaving into the cool air. At closing, the people walked home in pairs and small groups, their voices low, their pace unhurried. And that night, under the gaze of the dreamer's tree, Evershade slept more peacefully than it had in living memory. Part 6: The Season's Lessons. Over time, Elara's teachings deepened with the turning of the seasons. Winter taught the comfort of layers, not just blankets, but the layers of routine, warm tea, slow breath, dark rooms, each preparing the mind for longer nights. Spring reminded them to align with the early light, to wake gently as flowers did, without jarring alarms. Summer brought cooler rest through open windows and the lullaby of night insects. Autumn invited reflection, letting go of the year's burdens as leaves let go of branches. Elara never claimed to have found all answers. Sleep is a conversation, she often said, and every body has its own dialect. But she showed them how to listen. Part 7, Under the Dreamer's Tree. Years later, Elara stood again in the forest clearing. Around her, the people of Evershade gathered, not to seek help, but to give thanks. They brought small offerings, a carved wooden moon from Tomas, a stitched blanket from Elara, a bound collection of poems from Mara. As the sun set and the first stars rose, they sat in a great circle around the dreamer's tree. No one spoke for a long time. The hush was not empty but full, the same fullness Elara had felt years ago when she first pressed her palm to the bark. And it was then she understood, the knowledge she had gained belonged to all of them now. The dreamer's tree was theirs to visit, its wisdom part of Evershade's own heartbeat. That night, they walked home through silver light, knowing that sleep was not a thing to be earned in exhaustion, but a gift to be nurtured, night after night, year after year. Epilogue, The Legacy. Long after Elara's hair silvered and her steps slowed, the gatherings continued, the festival of nightfall returned each year, and the people of Evershade continued to live tuned to the quiet music of the night. Travelers passing through often remarked how peaceful the town seemed, how rested its people looked. Some stayed long enough to understand, learning the same gentle ways, carrying them onward to other places. And so, what began as one woman's journey toward peaceful sleep became a shared art, woven into the way a whole town lived, loved, and dreamed. For in Evershade, under the eternal boughs of the dreamer's tree, sleep was no longer an old struggle, but a nightly homecoming. Thanks for listening to this calming tale. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you never miss a new bedtime story to help you sleep soundly.